Hey, everybody, and welcome to Oh My Word with Katie, the show where we share stories of real life Christianity, the good, the bad, and the Oh My Word from believers who've been there. I'm your host, Katie Ginn, and I think these stories will leave you with some hope, some humor, and some practical life hacks. Today, I'm so excited to be interviewing Josh Woodward. Josh is the director of Mississippi ABLE at the Mississippi Department of Rehabilitation Services, where he gets to help people with disabilities in our state. He's also a husband, a father, a believer, a photographer, and we're going to talk about a little bit of all of that, including his calling at Mississippi ABLE and what helps him live that out. So, Josh, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And we both feel a little bad because we just found out, or I just found out, that you sit like two rows behind us at church. We had never met before.
Well, to be honest with you, too, I have another photography client who is Kate again, and so when all this started happening, I was like, wait a minute. I had to kind of do some internet,
Yeah.
sleuthing. Came up and realized it was you, and I was like, holy cow! I sit behind her. And
Well, your story you shared with me a little bit before we started recording. You are definitely feel called to your current position at Mississippi Able, but it's been a long, winding path, and it started when your dad had a really scary incident when you were 10 years old. So tell us about that.
sure, I'll try to not get myself worked up on this. When I was 10, normal kid, playing sports, running the roads, coming home when the streetlights came on, loved playing sports, specifically baseball. And one night, mom brought me home from baseball practice, and my dad was at home. And when we got in the door, he was not acting right. He was acting very disoriented. He didn't know where we'd been, which obviously we told him we'd been at baseball. He didn't remember how he got home. He had been at the gym. All he could really remember was that he had felt this big tearing pain in his chest, and that he felt disoriented. He felt dizzy, and my mom pretty immediately realized something was not right and hauled him to the emergency room, and they ran a gamut of tests on him. Of course, this is 1993. They sent him home later that evening with what they said was indigestion. Looking back at it, I'm like, who loses memory over indigestion? And throughout the next week or so, he was going to doctors, and they were trying to figure out what had happened and what was going on in his life. And he still had some weakness, some symptomatic stuff going on. But I guess where that story kind of hits an apex is about a week later, he was at one last doctor, and I believe that doctor's name was Tommy Thompson. And they had looked over my dad again, and my dad was putting his shirt back on, and he said, "Hey, let me listen to you one more time." And he put his stethoscope on my dad's chest, I guess exactly where it needed to be. He heard whatever he needed to hear and realized that my dad had dissected his aorta, which, if you know anything about medicine, that's the largest artery in your body. And the largest part of that aorta is right next to the heart, and that was exactly where my dad had torn his. And so my dad had been living with a torn aortic root for a week, which is unbelievable to me still to this day. But they got in such a panic realizing what it was that they didn't wait long enough for an ambulance to come. The nurse loaded him up in her car and drove him to the emergency room.
Wow.
My next memory of all of this happening was my mother bringing me into, I guess it was the ER maybe. The pastor was there. My mom, obviously my dad. My dad's on a gurney. They're preparing him for surgery, just to try to save his life, which I didn't know at the time. I also didn't know at the time they didn't expect him to live. He made it through that surgery. And right afterwards, they said, hey, this looks like Marfan syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder. And they said, we should probably check his children. It's hereditary and they can pass it. We went in and they tested my sister and I. My sister was 5 at the time. I was 10. And we both, shortly thereafter, were diagnosed with this connective tissue disorder.
Mm.
And the easiest way to describe Marfan, if you've ever seen athletes or, you see basketball players fall out and die of a heart event type thing, that's, in a lot of cases, that's Marfan's. One of the symptoms of Marfan is you can develop an aneurysm, specifically on the aorta. And over time, if that's not recognized or checked or fixed, it gets to a point where it gets so large and it bursts.
Mm.
If that happens to you, you either pretty much, have a heart attack or drop dead. They went into this whole complete protocol of, prevention for me and my sister. And at that time, I was very active. I played all the sports. And at that point in time, they were like, he doesn't need to be doing anything that elevates his heart, especially no contact sports.
Mm.
So no basketball, no football, no anything with contact. It was out the window. And I remember we had to kind of beg them to let me play baseball. And at 10, I didn't have the brain or the capacity to process what had just happened. I was just thinking that everything I love to do, I was just told I couldn't do. And that really upset me. It made me feel broken. It made me feel different, which when you're that age, you don't want to be different. It made me feel less than. And I just didn't understand. I don't remember if I showed it outwardly, but I became very upset and very bitter about it on the inside for quite a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so my sister was diagnosed. She, went through her own battles, even though I feel like she handled it better, maybe because she was a little bit younger. But time went on, and I started going to the cardiologist every year, to every 6 months, to every 3 months, to the point where they were mapping the growth of my aorta, the same exact thing that had happened to my dad. They were watching. They didn't want me to have surgery too early, but they also didn't want to let it go too late.
Yeah.
And so when I was 25 years old, I had a funny story, I guess. I just started dating my wife. 2007, I just started dating her in October. And my mother woke me up one morning because I was still living at home, because I'm that guy. And she said, "Hey, don't forget, you have a cardiologist visit today." And I went. And a couple of days later, my cardiologist, who I love dearly, he calls me and he says, "Hey, we're going to need you to come back in. There's been some growth." The magic number was 5 centimeters.
Okay.
I'd been at 4.8 for like 5 or 6 years, I think, before. And so there was hope, at least in my mind, that maybe I would never get to that 5 point. I would never have to have surgery.
Mm-hmm.
He calls me and says, "Hey, there's been growth." I came back as 5.3. But they had gotten some misreadings before, so I didn't completely freak out. And I went in a few days later and had a CT scan done, I believe it was. And so I'm working one day and the phone rings again and it's him. And I pull the car off the side of the road, which is probably a very good thing in hindsight. And I answer and he said, "Hey, it's actually a little bit worse than we expected." And I was like, "Well, what was the number?" He said, "It's actually 6.2.
Ah.
And so I'd gone from 4.8 to 6.2 in 6 months. And I said, "Well, what does this mean?" He said, "Well, I've already scheduled you an appointment with a surgeon." And so at 25, I'm like, I'm having open heart surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got this girlfriend who doesn't really super know me from a hole in the wall. And all of a sudden, my world's upside down again. And how am I going to deal with work? Am I even going to survive this? I mean, that sounds crazy to say now, but like those are thoughts that were going through my head.
Mm-hmm.
And so meet with an incredible doctor, surgeon. And for whatever reason, I remember thinking to myself, I wanted to make sure my surgeon was Christian. I just wanted to make sure that he valued life the same way I valued life, I guess, especially when it's my life.
Yeah.
And so I went and I had my consult with him. And for whatever reason, I was feeling very brave, I guess. And I just said it to him. I said, "I want to make sure that you believe the same things I believe."
Mm-hmm.
And this man starts quoting scripture at me, just laying it out there. He had me so fired up. I was like, "Let's do this right now." But long story short, I ended up having surgery at the end of that February. I tried to run my girlfriend off, my wife now. I tried to run her off. I knew that I wouldn't want to walk through that with somebody I didn't hardly know. And I felt like I was going to be a burden and I didn't know what that was going to look like. And she refused. She's a hard head like I am. She's like, "Nope, we're doing this together." And so I came home after surgery and she walked me up and down the driveway in my compression socks and
Mm-hmm.
all the things. And by the time I kind of came out of this process, our relationship went from all the feelies and all the, the early stuff to like real serious kind of quick.
Yeah.
It wasn't too long after that we were engaged and got married the next year. So she's still putting up with me to this day. But I guess rewinding a little bit, when I was a kid, I was so deathly afraid of what I had, and I was so angry at what I had that I told myself that I wanted to be a pediatric cardiologist. I was coming at it from a spiteful perspective,
Yeah.
and saying, and in hindsight, I know that they can't prevent what I had. Like I had what I had at birth. This was something that was in my family that my dad couldn't have controlled. I couldn't have controlled. But in my little adolescent mind, I wanted to make sure that I could, maybe stop somebody else from having to get the raw deal that I got, or at least I perceived I got.
Yeah.
But it turns out that chemistry 2 during the summer is never a good idea. And I did not do well. And I made a degree redirection, if you will, and changed my career path from medicine to business and marketing. My parents were both business majors, but I learned kind of later on that God was preparing me to use the tools that He gifted me, which was my mouth. And so I went into sales. I came out of college and went into sales and developed marketing and development and ultimately financial skills that I would use later in life to honestly do what I'm doing now, which led me to MDRS. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah.
I've rambled on. I can't remember where I'm supposed to be going here.
No, that's fine. I love that you wanted to make sure your surgeon was a Christian. I would want that, but I would have been, I'm sure you also did a lot of research on like, okay, how many surgeries of this kind has he done?
Oh, and what was weird is I don't remember thinking that thought. I remember thinking I want him to be a Christian. I guess in my mind, I had this feeling like a lot of these surgeons are very, they just have this massive presence about them that they are, I do this for a living and I'm important. And that man right there, all of my doctors have been incredible over the years. But I remember being so thankful and relieved, just his instantaneous ability to minister to me
Yeah.
calmed so much of my anxiety and fear towards having that surgery. And, we could take 5 hours to go through this, but it's the little details that God trickled into all of that whole process was unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
The nurse that sat by my side in critical care, cardiac critical care, was a man that my parents grew up in church with, and he knew me. Just all of the little things that made me feel like God had his hand on the whole thing.
Yeah.
And my whole story as a whole has been trickled with that kind of stuff. He keeps sticking me in places where I'm allowed to use my story and allowed to use my gifts to, I hope that he sees it this way, but I feel like where I can serve him and his kingdom
Yeah.
through my, occupation.
Yeah.
Like I'd never thought I'd been in banking. And then he would reutilize those skills to help individuals with disabilities.
Yeah. So let's talk about your job. What is Mississippi Able and what
Sure.
is your role in that?
So Mississippi Able is a financial program that allows individuals with disabilities to save money in their name without it affecting their public benefits.
Okay.
So you have people who, I'm on the check, which is Social Security, SSI or Medicaid, these are federal programs that are meant to financially support or medically support individuals with disabilities to give them a financial means when maybe they can't do that for themselves. Well, in certain cases, these people can work and they want to work and all of that. Well, the programs themselves have asset limitations attached to them. SSI, you can only have up to $2,000 in your name before they reduce or cut off your benefits. But that number was established like back in like late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
Well, $2,000 back then is not the same $2,000 it is today. Essentially, these people operate under the fact that I can't have money.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't have wealth. I can't have assets because I depend on these benefits. It kind of perpetuates an impoverished scenario. Now, some of these people probably can't work. They just are where they are. But, certain people, and I've had examples of this where, maybe somebody passes away and leaves them a life insurance death benefit, or maybe they have the ability to work and they want to go to work, even though they have a disability, right? They could be independent.
Mhm.
Um, but they're hindered in how much they can work because of this asset limitation.
Yeah.
And so what ABLE is, it's an account that allows them to put money into this account. And it's almost as if Social Security Administration does not see that the funds are there. They don't count them towards their asset limitations.
Okay.
And so people can put money into the ABLE account and acquire and build wealth, or, save money without it affecting their benefit status. And so they kind of get the best of both worlds. Now, to have an ABLE account, you obviously have to have a disability. You do not have to be on SSI or Medicaid or SSDI. They keep it super high level. You literally can go to a doctor and have a doctor write a note saying, yes, Josh has a disability, and that will
Mhm.
suffice.
Mhm.
They want people to use the program. Let's say that you have $1,500 in your account, and someone comes up to you and they say, "Hey, Josh, I'm gonna write you $1,000 check." Well, that puts me at $2,500. So that's over 2,000. That's a problem.
Yeah.
Well, I could take that $500 or as much as I wanted to and put it into an ABLE account, and SSI would be no worse for the wear,
Mhm.
because we want them to be independent.
Yeah.
And as much as I hate it, money is a critical part of independence.
So I don't know if the program has been around long enough for this, but have y'all seen people save enough money in their ABLE account to where then they're able to even get off of the public benefits and just truly operate independently?
So the ABLE, Mississippi ABLE, has been around since about 2019.
Oh,
But we do have some accounts through ABLE that are getting pretty sizely, which is awesome. And without dragging people into the nitty gritty details, what I always encourage people to do is if there's any questions about ABLE, to reach out to me and let's dive in one on one. But if someone is on SSI, which is supplemental security income, they can have up to $100,000 in the account.
wow.
Okay. If they're not on SSI, but they're on Medicaid, they can have up to $235,000 into the account. And so, we're starting to see folks with some pretty sizely balances, and some of that's coming through working, some of that's coming through gifts,
Hmm.
family members or church families or anybody for that matter, insurance benefits. And they're able to use this money in the ABLE account for disability related expenses, which is pretty much everything. There's very few things you can't do with it. It's creating independence for these folks, which is great. The working side of things is a whole kind of different conversation, because if someone is on SSI and they're working, the more they work, the lower it brings their SSI check down that they get monthly. And so that's a whole like seesaw kind of thing you got to kind of figure out together. If we're able to get them working and they can make more money without the check, you know what I mean? Awesome. Which it doesn't always work. But if it does work in that scenario, that's amazing. And we can still use ABLE to save those funds and set money back and help them prepare for, what if I need a new set of tires on my car? Or what if my air conditioner goes out? Or what if I need to have a doctor's bill I need to pay? Or, like, you have to have money to live. And I hate that, but it is kind of what it is.
Hmm.
These are not people who are taking advantage of the system. These are people who are leaning on these services for to live,
Yeah.
to have independence. That's the key word we always harp on at MDRS is independence. Everything we do is around independence for people with disabilities or individuals with disabilities.
Is there a typical or a more common disability that people deal with in Mississippi that maybe are utilizing the Mississippi
Sure.
ABLE program? Like, what's the range of like disabilities you see?
I mean, we do, I would say, have some that are more common than others that utilize ABLE.
Hmm.
Um, but all disability, there are just a couple of things that you have to have going on to qualify for an ABLE account. Number one, you have to have a disability. That can either be determined by the definition of SSA's definition of disability,
Right.
or it could literally be as simple as a doctor's excuse. The other determining factor, you have to have had disability onset by the age of 26.
Okay.
Okay. So, but a lot of folks come into disability later in life.
Yeah.
We can all have this happen to us, whether that's a car wreck or some type of illness. We've seen all the scenarios, workplace accidents,
Yeah.
but the definition currently for ABLE is that your disability onset had to have happened before the age of 26. Now, here's where things get confusing. On January 1st of 2026,
Uh-huh.
that age 26 number is
Uh-huh.
going to the age of 46.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I was talking to a good friend the other day who is visually impaired, and he mentioned that he did not actually qualify for ABLE, even though he is very visually impaired, if not completely blind at this point. I'm not certain. And I was like, really? I didn't realize this. I thought he had been born that way. And he said no, that it had come on in his adult life. And as he currently sits, he does not qualify, but on January 1st, he does.
Wow.
So I will be calling him
Yeah.
the first week of January to harass him and to get him helped out with opening an ABLE account. And the other piece about it is I can open an ABLE account for myself, but if I had a child or a loved one or a niece or nephew or whomever it may be that I wanted to open an ABLE account for and gift into, you can do that as well. So we see a lot of parents opening accounts for their children with disabilities. We see grandparents doing it. We see aunts, uncles, churches, even third-party organizations opening accounts on behalf of and for the benefit of these individuals.
Yeah.
And so when they do that and they gift into those, they do receive like a state level tax benefit and all of that. And so it's good. You kind of get it takes a village kind of thing.
So you are head of this program at Mississippi Able. And so you're head of the program, you are a photographer, you're a husband, a father, you have a lot going on. But in this season, because I know these things change throughout our lives, but in this season, if you could sum up, what do you think your specific calling is as a believer? Because we're all called to love God,
Sure.
love people, tell people about Jesus, but that looks different for different people. What does that look like for you?
I battle with that. I feel like, we're all called to be fishers of men.
Yeah.
And I feel that I fail at that a lot. Of course, I feel like I fail a lot anyway. That's just kind of how I'm wired as a person. But I'm going to turn you this way a little bit. Maybe my Wendy's layer will go away. The season of life I'm in, I feel like I try to bring that vibe and that love and that encouragement, try to bring that to my photography, which I know we haven't talked a lot about. I do try to bring that to my work. I also very much try to bring that to my children. I'm in this place where my kids are getting older and I see myself getting older. I'm trying not to be that just ornery old man. And a lot of times may come across that way, but in my heart of hearts, I want to make sure that my children are on the right path. I find myself breathing into them a lot, not only for just their benefit, but I want them to have memories of me of being that supportive dad, that loving dad, that funny dad,
Hmm.
you know, that dad that was always there when they needed them, whether it was having talks or wrestling in the floor or making sure they're on the right path in life. From a photography standpoint, my goal always is to bring joy.
Hmm.
Now, I've failed if someone is listening to this and I have messed up, Lord Jesus, I go to sleep worried about that every night of my life. I have imposter syndrome like a champ, but my goal every time is to bring joy, not only through my art, but through the experience with me. I want to be smiling and I want to play with the kids and catch those natural little pieces of their personality, that maybe they don't readily show to a camera.
Mm-hmm.
And then from my job, I am pretty much a behind the scenes guy. With Able, I'm forced to be more forward facing because there's just a couple of us that focus on this program here at MDRS. But my goal is to bring joy, independence, happiness, comfort, maybe would be a good word to use, because a lot of these folks come to me with a lot of anxiety of, they've always been told they can't have money. They've always been told that they can't save, that what am I going to do? And we're able to tell them about Able and provide them with a solution that not only relieves that anxiety, I hope, but
Mm-hmm.
also gives them some doors that they didn't know that they could open. I also love to coach. I love to be around young people. I don't get to do that as much anymore, but I feel that that's a passion and a place where I'm at too. Is I'm trying to figure out places where I feel like I can minister to people, even if it's not quoting scripture at them. But I find myself valuing good, hearty relationships more than I think I ever have in my life.
Yeah.
Less relationships, but just really solid ones. That's kind of what I hunger for in my own life.
Mm-hmm. Now, real quick, if I don't know if this is an appropriate question to ask,
No,
but have your kids been tested? Do you know what their
no, that's a great question. And I would be lying to you if I said that when I first saw my children, if I wasn't looking over them and inspecting them, you know what I mean? Not that it was the end of the world. I think my family has done a good job proving that you can have this and live a fruitful, successful life.
Yeah.
But I didn't want them to go through the emotional anguish and all the things that I felt like I dealt with. But the blessing of modern medicine is that I was able to give a DNA sample, and we were able to identify specifically which genes were, I guess, mutated might be the word, and then we were able to test my children against those, and actually test my whole family.
Mm.
But I am very extremely proud to say that neither of my children carry it actively.
Wow.
My son does not have it at all, and my daughter carries it recessively. So she would have to marry somebody with the exact same situation to pass it on.
Okay. Okay.
So it's pretty much, from what I understand, I hope there's not a geneticist listening to us one day, but from what I understand, that's a very, very almost impossible scenario that it'll be passed on in her life. My nephew does, and he looks like a carbon copy of me when I was a kid, which is awesome. But he is incredible and intelligent and growing like a weed and being a kid, and
Yeah.
he's living a normal life, and he will, and if I have anything to say with it, I'm going to use my experiences to make sure that he stays in a positive place mentally, physically, spiritually, so that he can not fall into those potholes or those bad places that I went to dealing with it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you had your surgery.
Yep.
It, how are you dealing with it now? Or what's the prognosis? What's the
Sure.
call?
And then once again, this is a whole nother conversation we could have on this. My favorite joke is that I'm a medical questionnaires worst nightmare. I'm like, check, 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 So what it really looks like for me now is when I had my surgery, they only replaced the aortic root, but they also replaced my aortic valve. And so they went with mechanical.
Mhm.
So my favorite party trick is I can put your kid to sleep in about 2 seconds because I thump like a watch. I click. I have a mechanical valve in my chest.
Uh-huh.
It requires me to take some blood thinners and some other medications to kind of make sure that I'm not at stroke risk or kicking off a blood clot or something like that, which I did do one time. But yeah, I pretty much Honestly, I think I live a more independent life now after surgery than I ever did before,
Yeah.
at least from the time I got diagnosed. I have to obviously be careful with my bruising and bleeding risk. I'm on a blood thinner. I have banged my toe on the coffee table a few times and caused myself some pretty significant injury. But outside of that, I live a normal life. Generally, it does take a whole team of doctors to keep me between the ditches most days. I don't have any issues meeting that deductible, that insurance deductible, but generally, I live a very fruitful, independent life. So,
That's awesome. Well, I know we're running short on time, but I did want to give you the opportunity. Do you have a favorite scripture or life verse, or just that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
so generally, and I'm going to do my best to not butcher it up, but one of my favorite verses, at least in the way it compares to my job, is James 1:27. Pure and lasting religion in the sight of God, our Father, means that we must care for orphans and widows in their troubles and not let the world corrupt us. Caring for orphans and widows, it's fairly specific, but the way I interpret that is caring for those who can't care for themselves.
Yeah.
What we do here at MDRS is not a job, it is a mission. We are state government, and hey, don't ever combine your government and your religion. But what we do is a ministry to people. I'm gonna try to turn you where you can see me a little better.
Oh, that's great.
But I guess my prayer is that one day, when I meet the Lord face to face, that He looks down and He sees my heart in all of this and knows that even though I was kind of doing it blindly most of the time, that my intention was hopefully pure.
Well, Josh, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been so much fun getting to know you and getting to talk with you and hear your story.
Well, thank you. Now I'm gonna have to throw stuff at you when you're nodding off in church. You know what I mean?
Yeah, make sure we're awake in there.
That's right.
All right. Well, y'all, if you enjoyed this episode of Oh My Word with Katie as much as I've enjoyed recording it, please give us both a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts and share this episode with your friends, because the more you do that, the more people we can reach with the joy that's found only in Jesus. I'll talk to y'all soon. Hey, y'all, it's Katie. If you enjoyed this podcast, you will love what we're doing at Mississippi Christian Living Magazine, which is all about pointing people to Christ and making their lives better. You can pick up free copies of MCL at more than 300 locations throughout the Jackson metro area. You can also visit mschristianliving.com or follow us on Facebook at MS Christian Living or on Instagram at MS Christian Mag. Thanks for listening to Oh My Word with Katie, and I hope you'll enjoy Mississippi Christian Living.